Most evenings in Boston followed the same quiet routine for me. I would leave the engineering office a little after 6, walk past the familiar brownstone buildings that lined the streets, and stop at a small cafe on Newbury Street before heading back to my apartment. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 29 years old, and if someone looked at my life from the outside, they would probably call it simple. But simple doesn't always mean empty. I worked as a structural engineer in Boston, spending most of my days inspecting old bridges, historical buildings, and structures that had been standing longer than I'd been alive. It was quiet work, careful work, the kind that required patience more than speed. Maybe that's why I never really fit into the fast, loud rhythm of the city. The cafe I visited most evenings was on Newbury Street. It was the kind of place where the lights were warm, the music stayed soft, and people didn't feel the need to talk too loudly. The barista already knew my order. Medium Americano? She asked as soon as I walked in. I smiled. You read my mind. A minute later, I had my coffee in hand and turned toward my usual seat near the window. Except that evening, someone else was sitting there. A woman. She looked a little older than me, early 30s, maybe. Her dark hair fell softly over one side of her shoulder, and she wore a navy blue blazer that suggested she had just come from work. Across from her sat a man in a suit. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Cafes were full of dates, meetings, and random conversations. But the tension between them was impossible to ignore. "Did you even hear what I said?" the woman asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone who had already repeated herself more than once. The man barely looked up from his phone. "Yeah," he replied lazily. "You're overthinking things again." She stared at him. "I'm not overthinking," she said calmly. "I'm asking for basic respect." He sighed the way people do when they've already decided the conversation isn't worth their time. "Look," he said, pushing his chair back slightly. "I've had a long day." Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and placed some cash on the table. Before the woman could even respond, he stood up and walked out. Just like that. No apology, no explanation, no effort to finish the conversation he had started. The cafe door closed behind him, and the quiet music filled the space he left behind. The woman sat there frozen for a moment, staring at the empty chair across from her. There was something about that moment that made the entire room feel heavier. Embarrassment slowly appeared on her face, then disappointment. Finally, she leaned back in her chair and quietly said something under her breath. But the cafe was calm enough that I heard it clearly. "Men like you don't exist." I wasn't sure if she meant the guy who had just left, or men in general. I looked around the cafe for another seat. Every table was taken except the empty chair across from her. Normally, I would have just taken my coffee and left. But something about the way she sat there, trying to look composed while clearly feeling, humiliated, made walking away feel wrong. So I stepped toward the table. "Excuse me," I said gently. "Do you mind if I sit here? The place is packed." She looked up, surprised. For a second it seemed like she might say no. Then she glanced around the crowded cafe and nodded. "Go ahead." I sat down and placed my coffee on the table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Up close, I could see she had thoughtful eyes, the kind that revealed someone who paid attention to the world around them. But right now, those eyes carried exhaustion. "I'm Ethan," I said after a moment. She hesitated before answering. Ava Morgan, 31 years old. At least, that's what I would learn later. For the first minute, we simply sat there in silence. She looked down at the table while I slowly sipped my coffee. Finally, I broke the quiet. "That didn't look like a great date." She let out a short laugh. "No," she said. "It definitely wasn't." She leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly, like someone releasing the weight of a long day. I swear dating in this city feels like a strange social experiment, she said. Bad results? I asked. The worst. For the first time since I sat down, she smiled slightly. I moved to Boston 2 years ago, she explained. New job, new apartment, new everything. Everyone told me the city was full of interesting people. And? I asked. And apparently the interesting ones are already taken, she said. I couldn't help smiling. What happened with the guy? I asked. Third date, she replied. And he spent half of it texting someone else. She shook her head. Honestly, it's not even about romance anymore. I'd settle for someone who just listens. Her words weren't dramatic. They were honest. And honesty like that always gets my attention. She looked at me again then, studying my face carefully. Sorry, she said. I'm venting to a complete stranger. It's okay, I replied. Most people would have just walked away after what happened. Maybe, I said. But leaving someone alone after a moment like that doesn't feel right. For a second, she didn't respond. Then she asked quietly, Are you always this calm? I work with old bridges, I said with a small smile. If I panic easily, the bridges probably won't survive. That made her laugh, an actual, genuine laugh this time. The tension around the table faded. She studied me again, curiosity replacing frustration. You seem different, she said. Different how? I'm not sure yet, she admitted. But you don't seem like the type of person who disappears in the middle of a conversation. I shrugged. Maybe I just believe conversations deserve endings. She leaned back slightly, thinking about that. Then she said the sentence again. But this time she was looking directly at me. Men like you don't exist. I smiled and lifted my coffee. Inside my mind, a quiet thought formed. Maybe she just hadn't met the right one yet. And somehow, without planning it, that ordinary evening in a small cafe on Newbury Street had just become the beginning of a story I didn't see coming. I didn't expect to stay long that evening. When I first sat down across from Ava Morgan, my plan was simple. Finish my coffee, offer a few polite words so she didn't feel completely abandoned after what had just happened, and then head home like I always did. But sometimes the smallest decisions change the direction of an entire evening. And that night, the conversation didn't end when I thought it would. Ava leaned back in her chair, studying me with the same quiet curiosity she had shown earlier. You're unusually calm, she said. I shrugged slightly. That's not normal in Boston, she replied. I laughed softly. People here move fast, she continued. Fast conversations, fast decisions, fast relationships. Everyone seems like they're rushing towards something. And you're not? I asked. She paused for a moment before answering. I used to be. Her voice had softened slightly, the way people speak when they're admitting something honest. I moved here 2 years ago, she continued. Marketing director position at a tech company. Big opportunity, big city, big expectations. Sounds like a big adjustment, I said. You have no idea. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was warming them, even though the cafe wasn't cold. At first, everything felt exciting. New job, new apartment, new people. I thought Boston would be the place where my life finally settled. And it didn't? I asked. She smiled faintly. The job worked out. The life part, not so much. I could hear the frustration hidden behind her calm tone. Bad dates, I guessed. That's one way to describe it. She shook her head slightly. You know what the strange part is? She said. What? I'm not even asking for anything extraordinary anymore. She looked up at me again. I just want someone who keeps their word. Someone who listens when you're talking, instead of waiting for their turn to speak. I nodded slowly. That doesn't sound unreasonable. You'd be surprised. The afternoon sun filtered through the large window of a quiet Boston cafe, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I found a small table in the corner, seeking a moment of peace with my coffee. That's when he sat down at the table next to mine. A simple hello was all it took to break the silence. His name was Ethan, and there was a gentleness in his eyes that was immediately disarming. We started with the usual pleasantries: the weather, the quality of the coffee, the charm of the old brick buildings outside. But soon, the conversation deepened, veering into the kind of territory you don't usually explore with a stranger. Ethan spoke about his work as a carpenter, the satisfaction he found in creating something tangible and real with his own hands. He said it taught him patience and the importance of a solid foundation, not just in woodworking, but in life. He asked me what I did, and I told him I was a writer, someone who builds worlds with words. He smiled, saying we were both creators, just with different tools. We talked about Boston, a city we both loved. For him, it was the history etched into every corner. For me, it was the intellectual energy, the feeling that ideas were constantly buzzing in the air. The conversation then took a more philosophical turn. We spoke about honesty. Ethan believed in radical honesty, the idea of being completely transparent in all interactions. He admitted it wasn't always easy and had cost him relationships, but he felt it was the only way to live authentically. He said, "When you're not honest, you're building your life on a weak foundation. Eventually, it's all going to come crashing down." His words resonated with me. As a writer, I often play with truth and fiction, but I've always believed that the core of any good story and any good life has to be truth. I shared my perspective that while I valued honesty, I also saw the importance of kindness. Sometimes, the unvarnished truth can be a weapon. I believe there's a way to be honest while still being compassionate. To choose your words carefully, not to deceive, but to protect. Ethan listened intently, nodding. He didn't argue. Instead, he said, "Maybe that's the real craft. Not just being honest, but learning how to be honest with grace." It was a beautiful thought, one that bridged our two perspectives perfectly. We weren't trying to convince each other. We were just exploring an idea together. As the afternoon light began to fade, a comfortable silence settled between us. We had shared more of ourselves in a couple of hours than I had with some people I'd known for years. There was no pretense, no agenda, just a genuine human connection. When it was time to leave, we exchanged simple goodbyes. We didn't exchange numbers or promise to meet again. It felt like that would have spoiled the magic of the moment. It was a perfect, self-contained encounter. Walking out of the cafe and back into the bustling city, I felt a renewed sense of wonder. Sometimes the most profound conversations happen when and where you least expect them, with the people you may never see again. It's a reminder that everyone has a story, a perspective worth hearing if we just take a moment to listen. Thank you for watching. For the next few days after meeting Ava Morgan, life went back to its normal rhythm. Work, coffee, quiet evenings, and the predictable routines that usually filled my week. But something about that conversation in the cafe stayed in my mind longer than I expected. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly. The way certain moments replay themselves when you're walking home or waiting for a traffic light to change. I kept remembering the way Ava had said that sentence. "Men like you don't exist." At the time, I had smiled it off. But the truth was, there had been something deeper behind those words. Something shaped by disappointment and too many experiences that probably ended the same way that Bate had ended. I figured I probably wouldn't see her again. Boston is a big city, after all. People cross paths once and disappear all the time. A week passed, then another, and I forgot about the possibility of running into her again. Until a Saturday afternoon changed that. I had taken the day off from work and decided to spend a few hours walking through the outdoor market near Faneuil Hall Marketplace in Boston. Weekends they were always busy. Street musicians played guitars near the entrances. Small food stands filled the air with the smell of grilled sandwiches and roasted nuts. and tourists wandered through the old brick walkways, taking photos of everything they saw. I wasn't there for anything specific, just walking, clearing my head. I stopped near a small stand that sold handmade notebooks and journals. The covers were simple leather designs, the kind that looked like they could last for years. I picked one up, flipping through the empty pages. "Those are actually really good quality." The voice came from my left. I turned, and there she was, Ava Morgan. For a second, we both looked surprised, and she smiled. "Well," she said, crossing her arms lightly, "either Boston is smaller than I thought, or you're following me." I laughed. I was about to say the same thing. She stepped closer to the stand and picked up one of the journals. "I come here sometimes on weekends," she explained. "It is one of the few places in the city where people aren't rushing." "That's exactly why I'm here," I said. She glanced at the notebook in my hand. "Do you write?" she asked. "Not really," I replied. "I just like the idea of having a place to put thoughts when they show up. That's more writing than most people do." She set the notebook back down and looked around the busy market. "I didn't expect to see you again," she admitted. Neither did I. For a moment, we simply stood there watching people move past us. Then Ava tilted her head slightly. "Are you busy?" she asked. "Not particularly." "Good," she said. "Because I was about to grab lunch, and eating alone in crowded places always feels slightly depressing." "That sounds like an invitation." "It is," she replied with a small smile. We walked together toward a small sandwich shop tucked along the side of the market. A few minutes later, we were sitting at a table outside with 2 sandwiches and iced drinks. The afternoon sun warmed the brick streets, while people walked past, carrying shopping bags and cups of coffee. "So," Ava said, leaning back in her chair, "tell me something interesting about you." "That's a dangerous question." "Why?" "Because engineers are not known for exciting stories." She laughed. "I doubt that." I thought for a moment before answering. "I spent most of last winter inspecting a bridge outside the city," I said. "It was built in the 1920s. "That sounds cold." It was. But it was also kind of amazing. "How?" "That bridge had survived storms, snow, traffic, and almost 100 years of wear. And somehow it was still standing." She watched me carefully as I spoke. "You admire things that last," she said. I shrugged. "Maybe." She nodded slowly. "That actually makes sense." "How so?" "You seem like someone who values stability," she said. "That's not a bad description." She took a bite of her sandwich before speaking again. "You know what I noticed about you?" she said. "What?" "You don't try to impress people." "That's because I'm terrible at it." "Or maybe you just don't feel the need to." Her words caught my attention. "Is that unusual?" I asked. "Extremely." She wiped her hands with a napkin. "Most people I meet in this city are constantly trying to prove something," she said. "What kind of something?" "That they're successful, interesting, important. And you don't care about that?" She shook her head. "I care about consistency." That word again. It reminded me of what she had said in the cafe. "I think consistency is underrated," I said. "Completely." We sat there talking for almost an hour. About work, about growing up, about the strange rhythm of life in a big city. And somewhere during that conversation, I noticed something. Ava wasn't guarded the way she had been the night we first met. She laughed more easily. Her shoulders were more relaxed. It felt less like 2 strangers talking, and more like 2 people who had known each other longer than they actually had. Finally, she checked the time on her phone. "Wow," she said. "I didn't realize it was already 3. Time moves fast when conversations are good." She smiled. "That's true." We stood up from the table and began walking back toward the main street. Near the entrance of the market, she stopped. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "running into someone twice in a city like Boston is actually pretty rare." "Are you suggesting something?" I asked. Maybe. She looked at me for a moment before speaking again. When we first met, I told you men like you don't exist. I remembered. You did. She smiled slightly. I'm starting to think I might have been wrong. I folded my hands into my jacket pockets. Or maybe I said, you're just collecting more evidence. She laughed. Maybe I am. Then she stepped backward toward the sidewalk. Well, Ethan, she said, it looks like our second accidental meeting is ending. Accidental, I repeated. Yes, she said with a playful look. But if we run into each other a third time, I might start believing the universe is involved. She waved once before walking down the street, and as I watched her disappear into the crowd again, I had a strange feeling. The universe might actually be planning that third meeting already. After the afternoon we spent at the market, I noticed something strange. Life didn't feel quite as routine as it used to. Nothing dramatic had changed. My job was the same. My apartment was the same. Even my evening coffee routine stayed exactly the way it had been for years. But somewhere in the middle of all that routine, there was now a small curiosity sitting quietly in the back of my mind. A thought that would appear every now and then. Will I see Ava again? I didn't know why that question kept coming up. We had only met twice, both times by coincidence. In a city like Boston, coincidences usually didn't repeat themselves. Still, the thought was there. A few days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, I was finishing a structural inspection near the river. My company had been checking several older buildings close to Boston Public Garden to make sure their foundations were still solid. Most of the day had been spent studying blueprints and walking through quiet hallways with a clipboard in my hand. By the time I finished the final notes, it was close to 5 in the evening. Instead of heading straight home, I decided to take a walk through the park before the sun disappeared. The garden was one of the few places in the city where everything slowed down. Tall trees lined the pathways, small bridges crossed the water, and people sat on benches enjoying the calm after a long day. I walked along the edge of the pond, watching the swan boats glide slowly across the water. For a moment, I forgot about work entirely. Then I heard a familiar voice. Well, this is starting to feel suspicious. I turned, and there she was. Ava Morgan stood a few feet away, holding a small paper bag in one hand. Her dark hair moved slightly in the evening breeze, and she looked just as surprised as I felt. For a second, we simply stared at each other. Then she laughed. This is the third time, she said. I noticed, I replied. She walked closer, shaking her head in disbelief. Okay, she continued. Running into someone once in a city is normal. Agreed. Twice as rare. Also agreed, but 3 times? She said, raising an eyebrow. That's statistically impressive. She crossed her arms, pretending to study me carefully. You're not secretly following me, are you? I promise I'm not. Because if you are, she added, your timing is incredibly good. I smiled. I was about to say the same thing about you. She glanced around the park before sitting down on a nearby bench. Well, she said, patting the empty space beside her, since the universe clearly wants us to keep talking, you might as well sit. I sat down beside her. What's in the bag? I asked. Pastries, she replied. There's a bakery a few blocks from my office. I stop there sometimes after work. She opened the bag and handed me one. Peace offering for the suspicious circumstances, she joked. I accepted it. Thank you. For a few moments we sat quietly, watching people walk along the path in front of us. A couple pushed a stroller nearby. A man jogged past with headphones in his ears. 2 tourists tried to take photos of the swan boats behind us. The entire scene felt calm, comfortable. So, Ava said after a moment, tell me something. What? Are you always this easy to run into? I didn't realize I had that reputation. Well, you're building one. I laughed. What about you? I asked. Do you come here often? Sometimes after work, she said. It is one of the few places in the city where my brain stops running at full speed. That sounds useful. It is. She leaned back against the bench. You know what's strange? She said, What? I've lived in Boston for 2 years. And in all that time, I never randomly met the same person 3 times. I shrugged slightly. Maybe the city isn't as big as it looks. Or maybe, she said thoughtfully, we both follow the same kind of routines. That idea made sense. People who value quiet places tend to end up in the same quiet places. Ava looked at me again, the curiosity returning to her expression. You're different from most people I meet, she said. You mentioned that before, and I'm still trying to figure out why. Have you made any progress?